Okay, I don't really know who this woman is. I've never really listened to her before, but she has some very good points on red flag and yellow flag laws, and which are the same as red flag. They just try to make it sound like it's nicer. Anyways, she's talking about The View, the show The View, and the dumbass women on that talking about stuff, and they're so upset about it, don't even know what the hell they're talking about. So they really aren't that interested in it, really, of what they talk about, because they don't know. They don't know. They haven't researched enough to know what they're talking about. But anyways, this woman is very educated on it. I would just like you guys to listen to her.
The less oversight you have and the higher the error rate you may have.
I
So
hope I
in New York,
started it at the
anybody can
right
report.
place.
In Maine, it's only law enforcement that can petition. And in the very beginning, and I still don't like it, but in the very beginning, you have a health professional involved. So a health professional is involved from step one, and then they evaluate to see whether or not someone is a danger to themselves or others. Then they take that recommendation to the judge, and then based on that recommendation, that individual has X amount of time to turn over their firearms, at which point, if they do not, then police come and seize them. Whereas, you petition the court, and then confiscation can happen immediately if they're not transferred to a third party, like a trusted friend or family member. So there's some, and the reason I don't like it is because it still is a runaround of due process. Again, I go back to, if someone is dangerous enough to remove from them a natural right, they are dangerous enough to lock them up. You can't, if they're dangerous enough to have their natural rights abridged, then they are dangerous enough to lock up. You must go through the process. We err on the side of freedom, which is why we also make sure that people are able to be their own first responders, because the average response time for law enforcement is anywhere from 19 to 20 minutes, and that's from 2021 figures. So this is all incredibly important to know, because this all factors into this stupid comment that Sarah Haynes said on The View. So she's talking about mental health and all of this other stuff and red flag law, which brings me to the question. This guy, this murderer, he was institutionalized in New York. And I want to point out that this was not like a 2-day hold. In some states, and some states have some discretion here, you maybe get 24 to 48 hours for a hold, like a 5150 in California or something to that, or in Florida, something to that effect. And then at that point, you cannot hold them anymore without probable cause, or without proper cause. You have to have a judge involved. Was 2 weeks, so that was a hell of a lot longer than a regular emergency evaluation to immediately deduce whether or not someone was a danger to themselves or others. This guy was institutionalized for 2 weeks. They say he was committed, not admitted, which sounds like it was involuntary. So that immediately, under 18 USC 922 subsection G subsection 4, that immediately makes him a prohibited possessor. He would have to go to court, go through a restorative hearing, and have those rights restored, or have them overturned, or end up being convicted and just be
Mind you, this is in New York, so he was admitted, or no, excuse me, committed, which means that he was put there involuntary, and under New York law, that would be justification for seizing all of his firearms,
or end up having that upheld and being a prohibited possessor after that. So he was in New York when this happened. Here's the process in New York, because New York also has the SAFE Act, and the Bruen case only undid certain aspects of New York gun law that was related to the Sullivan case, etc. That's a separate issue. SAFE Act, what it requires is that if someone is calling in mental health professionals, or if someone is trying to have someone institutionalized, you have to report that to the Division of Criminal Justice Services. And then what they do is they go to the judge, and then they pull the permit. They pull and see if you have a permit, and then they seize your firearms. This is a requirement under law. It's not a feature. It's a requirement of the system. So did that happen? Because if they held him for 2 weeks in New York on that, How was that not done? That's a requirement. And I've heard some people say, well, maybe it was because he was in the Army Reserve. They all go by the same damn laws as everyone else does. That is why back in Sutherland Springs, the Air Force had to settle with all these families because they failed to report that guy's domestic violence conviction to the National Crime Information Center, as is required by federal law. Their military branches are not exempt from this. But see, that's the thing. There's no incentive for reporting. And I've said before, you can have an argument over whether or not you think the background check system is unconstitutional or faulty, which we probably agree. We'll have.
I'm going to say there is an incentive for reporting, saving lives. It's just that these people that complain about this stuff and do the most on making laws don't give a shit about their own laws they have created. They only care about taking your rights away or your guns or from law-abiding citizens. It's stupid.
Have a separate discussion about that. But the issue is that when you don't have a requirement to report, or there's no penalty for non-reporting unless it's litigated and there's a settlement, this is what ends up happening. So what happened in this case? Furthermore, if someone is held for 2 weeks like that, there is an adjudication process for their release. Was this guy adjudicated, and the legal term is mentally defective? Was he adjudicated a mental defective? What were the terms of his release? In Virginia Tech, that murderer, which is one of the worst mass casualty incidents in the history of the United States, and it was done with 2 Glocks and not a rifle, that individual had to go through a process to be released. And one of the requirements, one of the conditions for his release is ongoing mental health care. And he did not regularly meet with his doctor. He fell through the cracks. So the people who were assigned to spot warning signs did not. So what were the conditions for this guy's release? That's a huge question that nobody wants to talk about because they're too damn busy bitching and moaning about an inanimate object that's responsible for the fewest crimes in America annually. That's responsible for the fewest fatalities. Under literal hands, feet, and fists. That's not a joke. FBI, every year, the latest data available is 2021. Their UCR, stand for Uniform Crime Report. They're publicly on this thing called the internet. People can go. They've got a brand new interface. It works seamlessly. Very easy to look stuff up. You can look at it by county. You can look at it by however you want to. But what it shows is that these rifles that everybody's talking about banning are responsible for the fewest homicides annually. So this brings us to Maine. So Maine, did New York let Maine know? Because the guy was apparently domiciled in Maine. He resided in Maine. He did his reserve work in New York, goes back to Maine. Were they made aware? Again, that goes back to, you got to find out, was there a process? Was he adjudicated mentally unfit? Is he a prohibited possessor? I find it weird that no one in law enforcement is telling us this. I'm sorry, but that's BS. That is absolute BS. That's the very least you should be doing, is telling us this.
You think there's not a reason they're not telling us this? Because blood is on their hands, not the law-abiding citizens that have guns. Everyone wants to pin it on us, guys. It's all blood on our hands, when truly it's blood on their hands for not following through with their own laws that they make up. It could work if they just did what they're supposed to do. Just makes my blood boil.
That's not a HIPAA violation. That's public information. Was this guy a prohibited possessor? Super damn easy to answer. Yes or no. Don't sit here and say that it's that's a HIPAA violation, but then freely tell everybody you literally put it out in a damn bolo that he was hearing voices. So which is it? Is it a HIPAA violation or not? Be honest with this information. When people are not forthright, they're covering their asses. If you don't want me to assume that of you, and I really would hate to assume that of anyone who wears a badge, then be forthright. Because I'm immediately suspicious of any governing entity, and that includes even my friends who wear the badge. God love you, but I do. I'm just an American through and through. So I got a lot of questions. So coming up, let's look at the whole situation with Maine. The other thing is, did he obtain his firearm legally? I don't know if you've seen some of the pictures of him running around. The rifle that he is shown holding in the CCTV footage is illegal in New York. So he couldn't have gotten that in New York because it had a detachable magazine. You can't buy that in New York unless you're doing it on the black market, meaning it's illegal. because you can't have that feature on a rifle in New York because of New York Safe Act. So he either had it before this happened, and then if he had it before it happened and he was institutionalized, they didn't follow Safe Act and seize his guns as per the law. So you see what I'm saying here? There is a lot of questions because somebody dropped the ball somewhere. There's no
And they don't want nobody to know who the hell it was or why or that it even happened. They just want you to believe that black guns with mags bad and everybody should not have them. Duh. When they save more lives than they actually kill, the statistics are there. They save more lives than they actually take. And as she said, and it's right there on the internet, under hands, fists, elbows, feet, more people are killed by hand than with these guns. Why are they so adamant about taking them away from us? Watch what's going on around the world right now. Why do they want to take our guns away so bad? To me, it's pretty obvious, but there's a lot of dumbass people out there that just don't see. They can't see through the mist. Just infuriates me. I've got family that think like this as well. And I'm just baffled. How easy would it be to take over this country if nobody had guns? What other reason is there? That's not a conspiracy theory. Not anymore.